In this movie, we're going to be taking a look at regular expressions and the way they're handled within PHP. You may not have heard the term regular expression before. Simply put, it's a way of defining a certain pattern of characters that we're going to check against any string that we wish to check them against. This can be useful if, for instance, we want to make sure that the user is only inputting letters rather than numbers. That's a simple example. Regular expressions can handle very complex patterns and express them very concisely within our scripts. Now, you may not immediately see a need for regular expressions with what we're doing at this stage, and it's quite a lot to take in over a couple of movies. You may want to come back to these movies later on. If you don't get it straight away, that's no trouble. You can just come back to these later and learn them as you need to. However, regular expressions are very useful, and it would be worthwhile you at least watching these movies now to get an idea of the kind of things that you'll need later on as we begin to create more complex scripts. PHP has support for two standards of regular expression. First of which is POSIX style regular expressions, POSIX, and the second of which is Perl compatible regular expressions. The POSIX standard is compiled by default along with the regular PHP installation, and so that's the one that we're going to be looking at now. Now, the string function that we use in order to deal with regular expressions is ereg. Let's start up a sample script, and we're going to use our standard variable sentence and put in some sample data. And what we're going to do is we're going to use this ereg function. We're going to use it with an if statement. What ereg does is it returns either true or false depending on whether the regular expression that we define as one of its parameters is found within the string that we ask it to check. So the first parameter will be the regular expression that we're asking it to check against. Let's use a very simple one. Just going to use the word word, and then the second parameter that the ereg function takes is sentence, the variable sentence. We're closing two sets of normal rounded brackets there, one because we opened one here and the other one there. The inner one is for the parameters of this function, and the outer one to define the limits for the if conditional. So if this function is successful and the word word is found within sentence, then we're going to echo regular expression found. Let's put an else clause in there as well. So over here we can see regular expression we're using. It's a very simple one. Word. Let's take a look. And it did find that pattern within the string. Now the pattern that we defined here was a simple set of letters. Regular expressions allow us to use a number of symbols to define patterns without piling up a whole load of if clauses and else's, and splitting our strings down and generally using a lot more functions than we need to for a simple pattern check. So, for instance, we can use this symbol, and what that says is check for this word here, word, at the beginning of the string. So if we go back here, we'll see the regular expression was not found because it wanted word at the beginning of the string, and it wasn't. So if we change that to this and check that in the browser, we can see that it's happy with that because the word this was right at the beginning. If we used this and save that, check that in the browser, it's not going to be happy with that. And the reason for that is that this function, ereg, is case sensitive. Now there is a case insensitive version, eregi, and that will return true for that search. However, we're just going to use the standard one for now. Another symbol we can use to specify is the dollar symbol. If we go back to Word, take a look here, and refresh, we can see that it's not happy with that either, because it hasn't found word at the end. What this dollar symbol means, very similar to the other symbol we just looked at, is that it's looking for this string right at the end of the string, and it hasn't found it because it's also found there's an S in the way, which means it's not locked right onto the end. If we added the S there and saved, we could go back and we find that the regular expression was found. If we use both together, then we'll find that, go back and refresh, it's not happy with it. The reason for that is it wants to find words in the entirety of the string. What it means to use both of them together is it locks this side to the beginning, that side to the end, so the only string it's going to be happy with is finding that exact match, and then it's going to say it found it. So there are two characters that the regular expression system uses to limit a certain pattern to the beginnings or ends. The curly to specify a number of times that a character or set of characters is to be found. Say, in this example, the number there is 3, and it's going to look back at the character that came just before, and it's going to say, do we find 3 instances of Z, one after another? So this sentence here, if we check that, it'll test true. It found the regular expression. However, if we add, if we take away a Z, it's not going to be happy with it because it wanted exactly 3 instances of Z. If we, for instance, however, if we put a comma after the 3, then it's going to be happy with a minimum of 3, but however many we want. So this would test true. If we put between 3 and 5, then what it's looking for is a minimum of 3 and a maximum of 5 Zs. Let's take a slightly more complex example, and we're going to test this time for the evil laughter, represented by MUWA, and then as many HAs as we want for good measure. A minimum of 2. Now, let's take a look at the way this works. This looks a little bit complicated. What we're saying is we want to see this part of the regular expression somewhere in the string, immediately followed by these 2 letters, and we've put them inside the normal brackets, and what that does is that it means that this part of the expression, which is the counting part, will come straight afterwards, and it will know that it's dealing with both these letters H and A, rather than, if we didn't use these rounded brackets, it would just simply be looking for 2 or more instances of A following H. What we're looking for is 2 or more instances of HA. And let's put that within our and we'll take a look and see it has found our expression, because we had about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And because we put the comma after the 2, it's looking for any number as long as it's more than 2 of HA straight after MUWA. There are short forms of the certain forms of this, of the numeric checking. We can use plus, and what this will mean is it's going to look for 1 instance of HA, or we can use the multiply sign, and that will mean that it's looking for 0 or more instances of HA. So it'll be quite happy in that case with simply that. However, if we use the plus sign, it's going to be a little more stringent, and it's going to want 1 or more instances of HA. So when we go back here, it's not going to be happy with it. As we can see from this movie, the symbols that we're used to using within PHP mean something quite different within regular expressions. We're going to take a look at a few more examples of the syntax of regular expressions in our next movie.